Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be.
So, John, 30 years ago, you found yourself at a low ebb in the desert in California, Death Valley. And you made a sort of, you made a commitment to yourself and to others at the time. You'd better make a book of your experience. And here it is. Yes. 30 years later. Why did it take so long?
All my books, they sat in a cupboard for 30 years.
How did you come to go to California in the first place?
Well, again, like with all my life, it's a long story. But some years previously, I'd had the amazing experience of looking into the eyes of a woman and, as it were, going right through into the infinite beyond. And that really turned my life upside down. I found it almost impossible, as it were, to get back into the old life of separate her and me, because I'd seen the oneness that contained us both. Well, I was in my late 40s then, 47, I think, to be exact. And of course, this blew my mind, just about. And it took me many years. Well, I've been digesting it in a sense ever since. And somehow learning to reconcile or to live both the infinite beyond and this relative separate existence. Anyway, it threw me into a period of depression and homelessness and just wandering around completely lost between the two worlds, with only this one idea in my mind, love. But it was love that just couldn't find any home in this world, anything big enough in this world to contain it. I went off to Africa, spent a time wandering in the deserts there, which was very helpful to me. And there's a book about that too, which was published recently, called Mystic Naturally in Africa. And when I came home from Africa, I once more fell into this depression of not knowing what to do. And then I met a young teacher, an American teacher in England at the time, and looked into his eyes and had the same experience of looking right through him into the infinite beyond. Well, that's what I was living for at that time. So I followed him. And that led me to San Francisco, where, as you can imagine, a middle-aged farmer in that new age world of completely culture that I was a fish out of water, to say the least.
The words square peg and round hole come to mind, John.
Square peg in a round hole, exactly. Plus, plus. So anyway, after a few weeks of that, I found myself once more adrift and wandering through a wilderness, not only in my mind, but geographically too. And it took me out into the Mohave Desert, first of all. And there there the old demons of depression and loneliness and absolutely not knowing what to do or anything took over. It was a dreadful time for me. I was really afraid of going out of my mind, which was really quite a terrifying experience. And then just driving along to nowhere, I happened to pass a a little motel gas pumps. I stopped there, and there was a notice saying cook wanted. So I went in, and anyway, the gist of it was that they took me on as a cook. So for the period, I worked as a cook in this little gas pump caf. It was on the old Route 66, which I'd never heard of at that time. I knew nothing about the pop culture. It wasn't my scene at all. And they built a new Route 66, a bypass some distance away. So this was the old one. So it was a bit of a backwater at that time. Anyway, there I worked, and this sort of gave me some sort of anchor, which helped sort of restore me to, which was very helpful in just sort of leveling out my mental condition. The other great feature of it was that I'd never in my whole life earned so much money. So after a few months, I had a pocket full of cash. So I hired a car. I was taken to Las Vegas, hired a car there, and once more headed out to my beloved wide open spaces, and had a wonderful few weeks touring the western states. It was always my boyhood dream to be a cowboy, and nothing could please me more than to be out on the prairie with the open space and the animals that I loved. So that restored me to some sort of, well, I like to say, feet on the ground. And so I ended on a high note, restored in both body and spirit. And so that was my experience in America. As Phil says, I've written a book about it. The cover's rather unlike my other books, which are usually based on nature. But here we are. I've also dipped into this culture of American bacon and eggs and pancakes and all the other things that go on in American cafes. And yes, Roy's Caf. It's still called that today, actually. It hasn't changed a bit from when I was there 30 years ago. So there we are. I subtitled the book. It's called Mystic Burning. You may wonder why I called it Burning, but this explains it. And then underneath there's a subtitle, Salutary Lessons in the USA. Don't come too close to me, the teacher said, unless you're prepared to be burnt. John Butler ventured close, and this is what happened. Continuing the story of his unfolding spiritual development from first beginnings to final union, burning, purging, or purgatory is always part of the process. Purging from what? From impurity, which in spiritual terms means the separated ego, I, me, mine. It doesn't happen all at once. It goes on till our dying day. But we can look back on our lives and see at least some of its most significant stages. In this, his 8th book, as he faces extremes of loneliness, depression, and despair amidst the hopelessness of human answers, John finds, as always, the saving grace of nature and finally of spirit. Irresistibly drawing the reader through day-by-day unfolding of actual events, the reality of natural mystic vision is revealed.
Thank you, John. Certainly it'll be available from your website, spiritualunfoldment.co.uk, in the books and DVDs section. And the Kindle version will be available on Amazon.
I hope it'll be of interest to at least some of you. Good reading.
Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself.